Hey, welcome to the Strategic Success Podcast. I'm your host, Courtney and Fricke. Thanks for tuning in. All right, it's here, you guys. The first workshop I have planned for 2025 will be on January 20th and 21st. As you know, I don't do group coaching. I don't do one-on-one coaching. I don't do consultations. I do a handful of workshops a year, and this is where I deep dive, open my brain, and dump it in a way that gives you as much information as well as some practical insight so you can, tackle whatever the topic is. So this class, it's my Fix Your Income workshop that is specifically geared for people who are already in the real estate industry, meaning title processors, real estate agents, appraisers, contractors, you name it. If you support or are part of the real estate industry, but if you have on your 2025 goals to start investing to do your first or next deal, this is the class for you. I am going to deep dive, what is a deal? Why should you invest in real estate? What is necessary to succeed in real estate investing? How do you find these deals? How do you fund them? Whether you have money today, whether you can qualify with a bank or not. I'm going to include things like sharing about creative financing and whatnot. And this class will be a 2-day deep dive. Lunch will be included both days, and a 100+ page manual will be included as well. This is going to be in the greater New Orleans area, in person only. Guys, tickets are $397 for folks who are in the real estate industry. Get your ticket today at CourtneyFricke.com. I'm looking forward to seeing you there. All right, friends, welcome to another episode of the Strategic Success Podcast. Today I have with me an investor, an attorney, Carly Nino. Where are you based out of, Carly?
I live in Goochland, Virginia, which is just west of Richmond, Virginia area, and I'm from Portsmouth, Virginia, so the Hampton Roads area.
Okay, so Virginia in the house, which I've been, thanks to Jimmy Ursula, I've been getting to know Virginia more. He's like a godfather over there, right?
Yes.
Well, welcome to the show, Carly.
Thank you.
I'm looking forward to having this conversation with you today.
Me too. I'm excited.
Yeah, well, look, let's jump into it. First, let's introduce you to the audience, right? So tell us about your experience with real estate and your experience with like creative deals, different things like that. Just kind of a high overview of who you are and what you do.
Okay, so 10,000 foot level, I got into real estate as a real estate attorney, I think 2015-ish. So I was doing closings. In doing closings, I started learning about what the investors themselves were doing, and I started to dip my toe in. So I've done some renovations, but really my focus is midterm rentals. So I own and manage a portfolio of those. They're largely in Portsmouth, but some up here in Richmond. I no longer do closings, but the most recent closings that I did were heavy focus on creative deals. So subject to owner finance wraps, land contracts, those types of deals. And now I've moved towards just consulting on creative finance. And I'll also do private lender documents and representation while I focus on growing my portfolio.
Well, look, we always love to see people who are in really in a W-2 world coming more into the investor world. But then but more than that, I think I always really enjoy when an attorney leans toward the creative side. It's like, oh, we got our hook on you.
It's fun. It's fun.
Yeah, I've got an attorney here in my backyard. He's like, I just love the creative stuff because it forces you to. He's like, it was funny. One time he introduced me. He's like, this is the woman who makes me pull out all my law books and like dive a little bit deeper, figure things that, we only went over one section in law school, right?
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to pulling from that experience and things that you've seen. And so today's episode actually came from, you made a post about a deal. So you broke down a subject to deal that got brought to you to try to rescue it. And I want to kind of talk through that and then talk through just some things that'll be helpful for folks. So anyone whether they're doing creative now or thinking about doing it or just doing business in the industry at all, I think there's some things to pull from this story today. So do you want to start off by talking about what you shared in that post?
Sure. So this was a subject to deal that I wasn't involved in on the closing side, but there was a private lender who lent in second position behind the primary to the end buyer. Um, and unfortunately, he was not being paid at this time. He hadn't been paid for a few months.
So the
And the
private
proper,
lender wasn't
Mhm.
being paid? Okay.
Yeah, and he came to me just through word of mouth referral. And to be honest, I'm not sure where that came from. I've helped back out a couple of these deals, but I'm not sure if it was one of those folks or not. So when we started looking at it, the end buyer wasn't performing at all and actually never even took actual possession of the property. I was able
What
to
do you
get
mean
in
by
touch
that?
with. Hmm?
What do you mean by that? And forgive me, I'm gonna butt in a few times here,
No,
but
butt in,
what do you
please.
mean by never took possession?
I mean, it was a ruse. So it turned out that the ultimate goal was just for him to get the cash in pocket and never to actually own or operate. Well, he owned it, but he never actually intended to operate the
Okay.
property.
Okay. And so did that come out as you started to investigate further into, what was going on in the transaction? Like, or um
Yeah, and also this was a property in my hometown, so it was easy to go take a look. Nothing had been going on. And he had told the lender that it was going to be an Airbnb, and that all this money was going towards, I mean, the money went towards the usual things, right? The arrears, the wholesaler, the agent who brought somebody to the wholesaler. I don't remember if the seller got maybe a little bit of money, 1,000 or less, and then the rest was ostensibly for furnishings and things to get the Airbnb up and going. So yeah, it was
okay.
pretty clear that nothing was going on at that property if you just took a peek past. And I think the lender was aware of that too, just from their inside knowledge. Um,
And do you recall how long it's been since they had executed this? So the
oh,
guy does his subject to deal, you know, and presumably where he was going to stop a foreclosure, he was going to get in there, furnish it, maybe do some repairs, I don't know, but furnish it and get it up and going. But at this point, he's not paying the private money lender. At what point, how long had it been?
I think it had been 3 months at that point when the lender reached out to me, and that was in 2023, maybe January 2023.
Okay.
No, am I remembering that right? No, I'm not remembering that right. I think it was actually late 2023.
Okay.
But I didn't double check my dates on that. But it had been a few months after, they had gone through the closing. So the arrears were all caught up and everything looked peachy at the closing table. But a few months later, not so happy.
And so, what was your goal in trying to help, um, fix the situation? Because a lot of times we're known as fixers, right? People come with
Mm-hmm.
us. Look, I literally got a phone call yesterday and they said, "Hey, someone said you can do a bridge loan." I'm like, "Well, I'm not a lender, but I'm like, maybe I can buy an option or something from them." Like,
Mm-hmm.
but people get sent to me and they get my job title like wrong, but they just said, "Oh, well, Courtney's who we throw all of our weird crap to," like, all right,
Yeah, but
this is so messed up.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I mean, I remember hearing you speak, and problem solver was your theme, and I said
Yeah.
that's people have grasped on, and you're doing great at that. So I'm not surprised that they're calling you. So this one came to me. It was it was unfortunately a no equity
Okay.
situation. So by the time the arrears were caught up, we were at probably a zero equity. I know Portsmouth really well. It wasn't this wasn't going to be a cash cow deal. It probably would have penciled out, but it would be tight. So my goal was to see if I could get the owner at this point, who was the end buyer in the transaction, to cooperate with me to deed it back to the lender, the second position lender, um, or to me. I don't know. I had to navigate. I didn't get through my full thought process on navigating that ethically. So I probably wouldn't have taken title. I would have, but I was trying to get it back to the second position lender so I could help him minimize his damages through setting up as a rental or something of that nature.
Yeah, so trying to find a way to for the
Mhm.
lender to get some better teeth. Did they so they but they
Yeah.
had a position on title?
Yes, yes, and they also tried filing a title claim, but that didn't end up going anywhere. They did. They were.
So a title claim,
They
like
had
a
a
title
second.
insurance, like a lender's title insurance claim?
Yeah, and that's pretty attenuated, but worth a shot when you're not getting paid. There were some ish. I hate that it's like this, but when you're doing closings and it's rushed and it's busy, there were some things. Now, I will say in the underlying transaction, each party had their own representation. So we
Okay.
weren't in a dual rep subject to, which is becoming less common for that to be possible. Most attorneys are
Let's
wanting to separate them out.
let's break that down. So Virginia, is it a attorney or a title company state?
It's whatever you please. Either one can do it for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
But most common, is it one more than the other? More common?
I would say that traditionally more people with creative went to attorneys, but I think now people are going more to title companies and maybe using the paperwork that they have used before.
Okay.
Pains me a little bit to say this,
Okay. All
but
right.
it's hard to find attorneys that can do creative and that aren't backlogged,
Okay.
because it is
Noted.
kind of a niche.
Well, you mentioned something. So you mentioned, a lot of times they're dual repped,
Mhm.
meaning what do you mean by that? A lot of these transactions dual rep. That's I know it's a little attorney lingo. I want to pull that out of you.
Yes, pull it out of me, and thank you. So dual rep is if Courtney, you came to me with a subject to deal, and I'm going to represent you as the end buyer, and I'm also going to represent your seller
Yeah.
at the closing table. Um, in any real estate transaction, that's a little hairy, and subject to, it's very hairy. I mean, as an attorney, you need to really be disclosing a lot of things. It's honestly would be very hard to 100% dual rep on a subject to. Um, it's possible, but if you've
So
got,
go ahead. Go ahead with that
I
thought.
don't know, it's just hard to do because a lot of times the goals might be a little different between your people, and you've, as attorney in the, you have an obligation to both of them to fully disclose every fact from
Right.
every side. So
Yeah.
attorneys have gotten away from doing dual representation because these deals are a little hairier.
And so I know my title company, so Louisiana, we do a lot more, it's title companies, right? And
Uh-huh.
a lot of times someone they'll have a sign a form that says that they don't represent either one of us. They're just in essence facilitating the transaction, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
A big CYA, but then they have an additional CYA that this is a subject to transaction. It's more riskier in nature for both the buyer and the seller. And then obviously we have a ton when you're doing a subject to transaction, as you know, there's so much additional subject to paperwork. A lot of that includes the disclosures, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
almost arguably one of the most important things for the success of a subject to deal, I would argue, is disclosures. So all parties know what they're getting into, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it makes sense. And that's actually something that I think we're starting to see um, with the rise of popularity of subject to. It didn't get created, it's been around for decades, but with the recent spike of the 2, 3, 4% interest rate loans out there, plus online gurus, there's this rise of popularity on subject to deals. And so we and we're gonna talk about how, continue to talk through the subject to deal gone wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
kind of pick apart and then talk about what we can learn from it. But there are subject to deals going wrong, and
Yes.
so then what are we seeing? We're seeing things in the industry kind of counteract that with either CYA measures. And so when you mention they're getting away from a dual representation, what are you more commonly seeing, um, other than that?
Well, I've been out of the loop for close to a year now and doing closings since I don't do them anymore. But what I really am seeing, I feel like more people going to title companies, and just where there's not, and I'm not an expert on this by any means,
Sure.
but
Yeah, just
there's
curious what you're
not,
seeing.
that requirement. Like attorneys, we have all of these ethics and the Virginia State Bar and all this code that regulates our behavior when you're given any kind of legal advice. And in a title company, that's not going to be the case. So that said, I'm not 100% sure what other things might be happening. I just know in the attorney world that I've been asked, hey, are you still doing anything? Because I need to send a seller to you for representation.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah. So
not
that's
doing
interesting.
those, but I think more people are probably going to title companies and then using paperwork, hopefully good paperwork they've got from an attorney to get those deals closed up.
I personally am, so we mainly operate from title companies, right? I don't think there's, I can almost never think of a situation, and I know some of the hyper creative people might, but I can almost never think of a situation where I would not use a title company, an attorney to do it for a number of reasons. And there's one that I'm going to bring up here in a second, but now I did have a friend who is in Pennsylvania, a little bit
Mhm.
near closer to you, right, than me down
Kind
in
of.
the south.
Yeah, well, yeah, we
Um,
can say that for sure.
and been doing this. She's been doing this for many, 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 many years. And
Hmm.
she went to go close a subject to deal at a title company she's been doing forever. Gets a phone call. I was with her speaking at a conference. She gets a phone call and she's like, "What the heck?" And they were like, they called her to say, "Hey, I'm sorry, we're being told by our title insurance um, underwriters that in order for us to be able to close on this subject to transaction, that the seller has to have outside counsel, which is that they're basically getting their own representation that,
Yeah.
hey, this is riskier and someone needs, basically who's not going to, they're going to benefit. So it's hard to not say that. But I think it's important that we start talking about this because like that was literally becoming a requirement for them to be able to do this transaction by their title, their title
Yeah,
insurance
it's the
underwriter.
Yeah, and I didn't even think about that piece. That's another piece of it is the underwriters, Fidelity, Old Republic,
Yeah.
all of those are starting to set different requirements for creative type deals too, or just outright saying they're not going to insure certain types of deals. So we're seeing that in other
And
types of transactions too.
I had a student who was in Ohio and he saw something similar where his main company, that title company that he was doing transactions with, they were a very large company. They stopped doing them because they had some of these go wrong and lawsuits ensued. And it was not that they couldn't win them, it was just the burden of the cost
Yeah,
and the maybe even also the bad press, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, so you said a second thing was that so I recommend people don't go do this on a freaking napkin, right? Like you want to do this, the success of your subject to deal depends on your paperwork, like you were talking about. I hope you have damn good paperwork, right? But you want to do it with a title company, whatever that looks like in your state, you know, but whoever
hmm
can facilitate this, I get title insurance. And
yeah,
when I have a private money lender, I get lender's title insurance,
yeah,
which is different than title insurance, right? You can't do
yeah.
that if you go to a notary, right?
Oh
And go
yeah,
just,
yeah, no, it would be absolutely crazy to not go have the deal officially closed at a law office or a title
right.
company. And I know people do it, but I mean it's such a nominal cost when you're
Yeah.
considering the value of your asset and the money that you're going to end up putting into it over
Right.
time, even if not upfront.
The 99.9% of the time, the people who are trying to skimp out on paying for the cost to do it actually legitimately are not interested in protecting all parties. Um,
I think I can agree with that. I've had a couple that I think it's just a question of like massive egos, but overall, yeah.
yeah.
Um, I
And
think
and
you're right.
so you mentioned, so again, go to notary, they cannot produce lender's title insurance, right? So you
Correct.
mentioned this deal came to you from a private money lender, someone who
Mhm.
took, either their 401k, IRA, personal cash, whatever, and they say, hey, I'm gonna lend on this deal. I'm gonna get a mortgage, a deed of trust, a note, and I'm gonna get a return, right?
Yes,
Um, but it sounds like they got lender's title insurance from the
they did.
original closing.
Yeah, they did.
And so then you said that they tried to file a claim against that. Do you mind
Yeah.
breaking that part down? I'd never heard of that.
I actually wasn't very involved in that. That's pretty tangential.
Yeah.
I believe that the argument that and this has been a bit since I even looked at this. And I don't know what made me talk about it the other day. It was, oh, I know what. It was this house came up for auction. That's what it was. Um, so for the title insurance, there was a question of whether, so this was an out of state buyer, LLC. that wasn't registered in the state of Virginia. Nobody caught that at closing.
Okay, so
Um,
let's just say they're from Texas. We're making up a state here. And
yeah.
they're doing business in Virginia. In order to be an out-of-state entity to do business in another state, you've got to register with the Secretary of State or whatever
Yes,
the head of the
and
state
and
is.
technically owning real estate isn't enough, I believe, and I haven't delved into case law on this, but
Sure.
I think
That's
in
questionable. Sure.
general, owning a piece of real estate is not considered running business, right? And that kind of makes sense. But my argument was going to be if this had, like, if we had gotten any teeth with it, that running an Airbnb is a business. I don't know
Yeah.
if we would have gotten far with that because on the deed restrictions, the case law for no businesses, courts have ruled here in Virginia that Airbnb is not a business for purpose of deed restriction. So I don't know if we would have hit a wall with that. But at that point, he was throwing out anything that might
Yeah.
stick.
Trying to poke any holes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean the boat's sinking fast and you're trying to say, hey, what might be able to help?
Yeah.
So okay, so that's interesting, right? And so and I'm asking this more so because you said it got me thinking. And so, I deal a lot with private money lenders who lend on my deals, but like, I mean, I just had a major deal earlier this year where I had an investor go under and like 15 different private money lenders got hurt in the transaction. And man, like just thinking about are there ways that I could have thought through to maybe find them, help, right? And so I'm just always,
Well, and I
curious and
think
I
that
like
it's
to.
something that and it's on my long to-do list of things to
Sure.
research, but I think it's an important conversation that to have. I would like to reach out to some underwriters, and I have some people that are now retired and might actually shoot straight with me
Sure.
on that and try and dive into that because it could be worth pursuing in certain cases if there's little inconsistencies where, like you said, there's a hole that can be poked and there could be some coverage.
So I I don't talk about this a lot, but one of the ways like I have made multiple six figures in real estate has been curative title. So dealing with title liens, missing heirs, complex ownership stuff, and basically buying properties that are way upside down and then finding a way to build a path to profit. Um, and this is actually one of the ways you do it. That if something wasn't recorded correctly, and so one of the deals I made six figures on, the big windfall was because I found that so like a lien in Louisiana, a general lien or judgment expires
Mm-hmm.
and prescribes at 10 years. In order to keep it going, you've got to
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, when that creditor did that, I found a fault when they did that. And in that, at that 10-year period when they went to go extend it, I found fault in the paperwork that allowed me to completely throw the entire judgment out. And it was in first position, and it was the
Wow.
straw that broke the camel's back. Um, and so it's little details like that. Now, most
Yeah.
investors, this is when I geek out. My Christmas party's like half attorneys. And even though I've never studied law, I have like 15 law books in my study.
Uh,
Um, these are stuff that I enjoy because you never
it's
know, there might be a little piece.
it's fun. I'll never forget just a real quick little story that and I can't remember who told me it was before I was in real estate, but Dominion Power here in Virginia, and it may have been one of the ones before Dominion had it, didn't properly record an easement. And I think it was one of his clients got who knows how many six figures to
Yes.
allow Dominion or the power company at the
Fix
time
that.
to record that. And now, I mean, of course, I am sure Dominion or whoever it was hired so many people to look back and make sure
Yeah,
they
someone
had,
got fired from that, I'm sure.
oh, multiple parties.
Well,
But
but
yeah,
it's
those
little
types of
things
things
like
are
that.
fun.
Yeah.
And title insurance it's yeah, it's a nerdy topic, but it's so important. I think
Yeah.
one of the huge developments here in Norfolk back in the 80s and 90s was a mall where there was a missing heir. And that person ended up getting who knows how many millions because he was an heir and there was, they had
They
to fix
didn't
it.
properly notify him and they missed him. And
Yeah, something to that effect.
he did a title insurance claim on the purchase, right?
I
Or
don't remember the details. I just know that
something.
somebody had to pay out that missing heir all that money.
Because they missed it. Yeah.
because there was whether it was the title insurance company or if the buyer didn't have the proper protection. They probably did, and it was probably the title insurance company. Good day for the air though.
Yeah, good day for the air, but good day that number one, they realized it, and then number two, they took action.
Yeah, well, this is
Um,
true because without the action, where are you?
um, I'll leave my good friend unnamed, but I know a friend who had an option on prime commercial interstate frontage land and long-term option on it. And he drove by it, or someone drove by and called him and said, "There's a hotel on your land. When did you get paid out on that?" And he goes, "Huh, I didn't." They missed his option. And that would have been a case that potentially could have been a lie down case with getting paid out. And but nonetheless, so the devil's in the details, right? And so getting
Absolutely.
back to this, so I can already tell that I'm going to enjoy tangents with you. So I'm going to try to control myself because this is where I geek out. In
Yeah,
another life, I
same.
wondered.
Say, I'm no help. No help.
Hey guys, Courtney Fricke here. We've got Aussie Steve. And look, if you have a deal that needs to get moved, Southeast Louisiana, even in South Mississippi, we're your folks. We are the largest dispo company, really in the greater New Orleans area, even Southeast Louisiana. We have great contacts in South Mississippi as well. Steve, why do we move more deals than others?
Just we're very deep in this market. So Greater New Orleans can be really confusing for national wholesalers. The comps are hard. We change block for block. We got flood zones. We get a lot of hurricanes and the likes, and just a lot of the national platforms don't have the buyers on their list. So we are deep with buyers, but we're deep with relationships, which is really important in this market. So we love JVing with out-of-state investors.
Like I said, we do a ton of business with other investors. So go to homebuyerlouisiana.com/Courtney, fill out the information. We'll get in touch with you and we'll move this deal along. This is where I've made so much money. So I have right here. Have you ever heard of a guy named Jimmy Napier?
I have from,
Old school guy.
Yeah.
Old school real estate guy. I like him. I've got a lot of the old school guys here, and I have Jimmy's newsletters here. But I have a quote that says, "The most money we will ever make in real estate will become from thinking." And so that's what I love about this is these little stories. When I hear something, I pull out because I might be able to file it away, and my brain will, I'll be working a deal, dealing with, a lender who got, in some hot water with something, someone who's struggling on a subject to deal. An attorney calls me about something. Hey, I've got this file and I'm just racking my brain. I love when attorneys call me to just talk shop to try to help them. I'm like, I'm not getting paid a consulting fee, although whatever. There could be a world where we'd be like, well, you're really a consultant. Yeah, but like, you know what? I enjoy it because you know what? I like the chess of figuring it out, right?
Yeah.
And so
It is fun and it's
it can be profitable.
yes, and it is enjoyable to have the time to think and figure these things out.
Exactly. So let's get back to this failed subject to deal. So
Yeah.
um can I just ask, did the private money lender know they were lending on something with no equity? Or did it presume it had equity day one? Do you recall that?
I don't, unfortunately, they were new, and they didn't have any guidance. Yeah, they were new. This wasn't somebody that could afford to take this kind of loss, unfortunately. And I don't think that they had much, if any, prior lending experience or maybe even much real estate experience. So I don't know if they knew even to ask that.
Okay.
But I don't think there was an assumption that there was a lot of equity.
So this is huge. So right now, with the rise of popularity with subject to, um, one of the biggest things is when you do subject to deals, you need money. You need money. I mean, I heard there was a wholesaler got paid, an agent got paid, there was arrears to catch the loan, so the loan was behind. So there's money that had to be, paid out to catch that loan up, closing cost, and on top of that, money to furnish it. And so if you guys are looking at lending, please absolutely protect and advocate for yourself by learning first some of the key ways you can protect yourself, no matter how good the sales pitch is, right?
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure you can attest to like there's a lot of well-intentioned people where plans don't go accordingly, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but all right, so that's interesting to know with the lender. The lender's trying to, okay, got into this deal, didn't have a ton of experience. I got into it. I'm now up a creek because I'm in second position and I'm not getting paid. Do you recall if
And it's actually interesting that I think now that I'm thinking back on this one, they may have actually been in third position because I think the attorney did a mirror wrap
okay,
for the
okay,
seller. But nevertheless, functionally, they're behind the
functionally
main
one,
deal.
but yeah,
So
okay,
numbers
so
wise.
do you recall if the investor was current on the subject to part?
Oh no, they didn't pay anything.
So they got the money, they caught up the loan. Do you know if
Yeah.
they caught it up?
Yeah, so that was all done at closing.
Yeah, because
So
they didn't have their hands on it. Okay.
yeah, all the arrears, the closing was done on the up and up as far as it goes.
Okay.
It's just that point forward that
Yeah.
nothing happened.
So the investor who was doing the subject to,
Mhm.
they not only raised private money, so presumably they have no money into the deal. Someone brings all the money to get the transaction done, and then at the closing, they are cut a check for, to furnish it and different things like that. And so then that person, that investor, from what it sounds like, is they weren't paying the subject to loan, and they also weren't paying the private money lender. And you said just recently this got brought back on your radar, which is what incentivized you to make the post.
Mhm.
What brought it back to your radar?
So when I look at real estate, often I'll heart it on Zillow. So I get alerts if something happens to it. And it went up for auction. And so I was tracking it because, sometimes that changes. But auction.com, I got the notice that it was cleared and it was going to auction, that next day, I think, after I made that post.
Yeah.
It didn't sell at auction. I don't know. I wasn't able to go. I don't know if nobody bid or if they just didn't meet the minimum, but it's back in the bank's hands now. So
Yeah.
TBD.
So at this point, and I want to only briefly say this, but to your knowledge, the investor who bought this deal subject to has been a known offender who's, you said potentially has done this other times.
I didn't know that until I made the post, but apparently, yes, that's
Okay.
the case, that this is a now known offender for this. And
Has gotten
people,
kicked out of groups, being found as someone who was, fraudulently doing these deals and getting loans and stuff like that, right?
yeah, and potentially this group of folks is going to pursue other, means to go
Sure.
after this person with attorney generals or similar.
Well, and so let's pull away from this deal a little bit, right?
Okay.
And let's talk about, so this is a small overview of a subject to deal gone wrong, right?
Right.
You were kind of brought in from the private money lender who was involved to say, hey, is there any way I can get help?
Mm-hmm.
And look, real estate, you can make money, you can make good money, but you can also lose money, you can lose good money, right?
Yeah.
And so it's important to understand risk. With the rise of popularity with subject to deals, I want to kind of talk about ethics, because I think, unfortunately, other worlds that are licensed have regulations for ethics.
Yes.
You as an attorney, what does that look like?
So the Virginia State Bar, and they have a whole code and whole ethics code, ethics hotline, legal ethics opinions. It's a
You report
very
people to it.
dense. Yeah, you can ask questions if you have questions for yourself, and they'll give you an opinion. You can report people. There's disciplinary action. Yeah, it's self-regulated, so attorneys self-regulate through the bar. But yeah, you don't want them to be involved in your life. Like, you want to stay far, far away. So you
Right.
want to stay on the up and up.
And so I think, there's always been fears of investors being pulled into some level of regulation.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it's been around the ethics conversation, right? So you got
Mm-hmm.
wholesalers, right? This started happening where a lot of the states started regulating and then forcing wholesalers underneath the having a agency license, right? So becoming a real estate agent.
Yeah.
because they've got a code of ethics and a board and, you know, state board and they've got
Mm-hmm.
a national one as well. You know, what are your thoughts on that with, you know, because investors don't have any type of board.
Um,
Ethics.
oh, so many thoughts. I'm not a huge fan, frankly, of more boards and more regulation and more things. I think that we have tools in place that we can use to get after offenders. And I think more of us that are actually doing the investing need to speak up and call out the offenders and maybe take more action on our end to try and help others be aware of that type of behavior.
Yeah.
And yeah, we're having it now in Virginia that we just passed the whole anti-wholesaling law here.
Yeah, I
I mean,
remember that.
it's very flawed, and I don't think it helps a whole lot, and it's very easy to get around.
Yeah.
And so I just don't think that a lot of times the regulations help in the way that they're intended, or the regulators, the legislatures hope they're going to help.
Yeah.
But we do have tools. We have attorney generals, we have consumer finance protection laws and things that can be used to help in the situations. But I mean, unfortunately, you know, once something like that happens, it's always harder on the back end for people to get a remedy. It's education up front. And how do you get that to, you know, to the people that are doing these deals, not
Yeah.
sure the investors, but the people that are working with these people? What do we do to help protect them more? Because I'm not 100% sure that having a code and another board gets us there, but I guess it is a tool. How effective, I'm not sure.
You're speaking to the libertarian in me. I don't want something that I would call akin to government. Um, you know, I don't love that being created either, right? When Louisiana got their anti-wholesaling bill proposed, we argued against it. One, because it was so similar to, you know, flawed in how it was written that they actually
Mhm.
didn't realize it was actually hurting um, any other type of you know, interest in a property. So like a bond for deed or a land contract, like it was
Mhm.
hurting a lot of other things as well with how it was written. But the that is one tool, but it's a tool that um that's common. So that's, you know, like there's examples, there's, you know, attorneys and agents, and so you kind of reference that in the real estate world. And I do think that those other tools you mentioned, you know, so for example, this guy who is potentially, allegedly a repeat offender,
Mhm.
who's buying property subject to, and even getting private money lenders and then not paying, you know, you and I, you know, one of the things we heard is that he was learning from someone and got kicked out of their educational group. So
Yeah.
there seemed to be the group of investors that he was kind of either hanging out with or whatever realized this effort and kicked him out. So there's some self-regulation in the industry, right? But
Mhm.
what is, you mentioned like the attorney general, the consumer finance protection bureau.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts on stuff like that? Do you think that we're gonna see more people like these bad faith actors being made examples of?
You know, I think if we come together as a group and really push maybe on some of the attorney general to make examples of some of these people, maybe we will. I'm also I I battle myself on this because I don't know the right answer.
Yeah,
But I do think that if we can, especially like show that there's some teeth in some of this, and we, you know,
yeah,
if you're just out here bad actor, like there's consequences for you, like that can come from this already existing, you know, regulatory framework that we have. I don't think it's a bad idea, and it exists, and it doesn't create a complicated process where ostensibly there's just money being paid in for what, you know, and like just all these. I just don't think that making people have to be an agent really solves
yeah.
as much. But I don't know, and it's kind of TBD, and maybe we're going to see what happens with this buyers. As we've learned, like there's multiple people that this has happened to. Maybe it's going to be able to have some teeth. I don't know how successful you are if you take one person, you know, to
Just
the
got one.
AG. It's just a limited, you know, it's just a matter of resources too, I'm sure, for these
Sure.
agencies as well.
Well, and this is all just a thought exercise here because I'm
Yeah.
like, I do think one, it's important that people understand that you're dealing in a legal world of binding contracts, and you're dealing, especially when you're dealing with consumers. So these civilians whose it was their house tied to their credit that, they're getting foreclosed on. Like,
Yeah.
let's talk about the victims here. I mean, we had a seller who, yeah, they were facing foreclosure on their own right? Presumably they were the one who got themselves in foreclosure in the first place. That this person caught that up, but then when they said they'd make the payments on their behalf, they didn't. And so
Yeah.
then now you have them now going into foreclosure from someone else's actions, right?
Yeah.
And so you've got that victim, and then you've got the private money lender who, yes, they made a commercial business investment decision that has risk. And so the government sees that as less of a victim because, well, if you're going to invest, if you're going to, of course, there's always cases where, um, that big Ponzi schemes where a lot of
Right.
individuals, made investments and they got hurt. You see the government step in. But it's definitely going to be cases where it's like homeowners and individuals who, on the front is more seen as the victim, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I had somebody ask that question when I made that post, like, what did the seller lose? And
Yeah.
at first the question made me mad. So I was
Yeah.
like, of course, well, their faith in humanity. Hello, this person just sold them a complete lie.
Yeah.
Like, but then that was dramatic, and I didn't say that as the answer.
But
But what
it's
I, but they
just
do,
yeah.
they lose their option to have it handled by somebody that could have actually helped them.
Yeah.
I or many other investors could have made that deal work. It wouldn't have been hard to do.
Yeah.
So they lose that option. They lose their option to just do a short sale and be done with ever thinking about it again.
Yeah.
And other things that I thought of when it wasn't
Sure.
lunchtime. But you know,
They lost the peace of mind of
well, that
they
too.
thought it was
And
done, and now they're being
yeah,
drugged through the foreclosure process as this, goes through, and then yeah, they would have been foreclosed eventually, and so they're getting foreclosed on now effectively. And so it was just at that point a delay. But when they thought they were done, now they're being drugged through it for and however long that process is.
yeah, and they don't have the title to be able to navigate and take a different action.
Yeah.
And that was the issue. I was trying to get the title back into the hands of somebody that could save this.
Yeah, like the
And I
seller could
wasn't
have
able to
moved
do it.
back in,
There was
maybe.
a Yeah, I mean there was ways to make this work, and I've done it
Another
before. If you
investor could have stepped in. Yeah, a
Yeah,
lot of
there's
different.
a lot of different things. So they lost that entire world of possibilities of this going right, and it absolutely could have gone right from the outset.
So, and so some lessons here. Let's highlight some of them. So, first of all, when someone does a no equity subject to
Mhm.
deal, there's there's no such thing as a risk-free subject to deal. Um, very generally speaking, and there's risk for both parties, buyers and sellers. But one of the
Yep.
big, but especially when you buy with no to negative equity, you amplify that risk,
Yes.
right? Uh, so we were talking earlier, I just dropped a video on the due on sale call being called and for a deal. 3 days, 2 or 3 days after
Wow.
the closing, it got called. And so they didn't have time to build in equity. They didn't have time, to even put a
Yeah.
tenant in it yet, right? Like
Wow.
so imagine if this person, let's forget their bad faith, let's just talk about the no low equity.
Right.
Big deal there, right? So then now, not only is this investor, you know, the seller is at risk with it being called, you've got this investor, and then you also have this private money lender
Yeah.
who did a loan on a deal with little to no equity that's now for
Right.
sure upside down because of
Yeah.
the second debt. Um,
Yeah.
that's a tough learning piece there. And so, we want to share
Absolutely.
this. If anyone's thinking of lending, do you, what are some lessons that you got from this deal that you can maybe kind of share as a canary in the coal mine here?
Well, first and foremost, and I've said this on my socials before, and I think people get tired of hearing me because I feel like I'm not trying to be preachy, but it's just important. Um, if you're going to lend on a subject to deal and the numbers are based on a rooming house or a pad split, Airbnb, or some other
Yeah.
magical and income stream, and they may be valid and they may make that kind of money, but don't lend based on those numbers. Please lend on solid long-term rent numbers. If it's on a negative equity deal, I mean, just be prepared to say adios to that money. I mean, I wouldn't hop in second position on a no equity deal. I don't think it would be very rare. It's
It would
just a
have to
hard
be
position to be in.
prime real estate for me. You know what I mean? Like, or it would have to be like a 1.75% loan that I'm like, weak in the knees overseeing the loan,
Yeah.
like in first.
Well, yeah, and there would be times, right? But it's going to be few and far between. And I think you need to know who the operator is. You need to know them well. And like if it's somebody that owns a lot of real estate, operates these types of deals, and you maybe can cross collateralize and you have a strong personal guarantee, yeah, it can be done. But just if you're just looking at that and you're saying this is not somebody I know and I'm not 100% sure, probably your answer should probably be no.
Yeah.
It's
I think that these are some great points, Carly, because I did a 72 deal earlier this year where between the first, it had a partial claim second, and then
Mhm.
it had, I needed 72,000 to catch up the loan, pay off some other judgments and liens, renovate it, do all these things. Between the first, like all the collective would have put me like no equity. And I personally, my rule of thumb is I don't like more than 85% collective loan to value when I have a private money lender. I do, that's a rule of thumb I have to protect them. Now, it forces me to find deals with equity. And I buy them frequently, so they exist. I think when people buy subject to deals with no to negative equity, and especially a lot of folks are doing it, it's a lack of skill. They're just going after, like, anyone can say yes. Oh, you'll buy my property that has no equity and especially when they have no cash flow. Like, oh geez, like,
Yeah. And look, I've done it myself. I got little starry eyes and want to help.
yeah.
And I myself last year bought a no equity one. And I don't recommend it because even if you're making it work, and even if you could save it, if it's just a layer of stress that you don't need to bring to your life, like
Well,
period.
in full disclosure, I've bought 72 deals with no equity, but they were in the best neighborhoods and they had a really low
Yeah.
loan, but I didn't bring a private money lender. I used my own cash on it. And
Yeah.
so going back to this deal that I needed a private money lender on, I didn't feel comfortable. So, but guess what? I was able to think, 30,000 foot above. And I said, I have other properties with equity. So I just gave them a second on another
Yeah.
that had plenty of equity.
Yeah.
And it made that private money lender safer. And so for anyone using private money or private money lenders lending, you need to think about these things. And I 100% agree what you said. Like, don't speculate on this higher revenue model,
Yeah.
pad split, independent living, midterm Airbnb, so short-term rentals, midterm rentals, all these different things. Look at that long-term rental and say,
Yeah.
hey, if it works on this, let's go and let everything else be, icing on the top, or as we say
Yeah.
in Louisiana, the lagniappe. So the little bit extra.
Yeah, I had not heard that.
Yeah, most people know. And look, if you see how it was spelled, you'd be like, Lagnappe? It's
Thank you
spelled
for not subjecting me to that.
so I took an Uber we went to a show, the small little tidbit. We went to a show the other night and we took an Uber there and
Mm.
and we were laughing because he says he gets tourists all the time in New Orleans. And we were turning on one of the hardest to say name streets in the city of New Orleans. It's Chapatoulas, but it's like spelled crazy. And so we were just laughing when he was telling us stories of how people say stuff in New Orleans. Every local has a story like that. But anyway,
I'm sure, and I hope to one day be the people y'all are joking on. I've actually never visited.
oh, you'll have to do it. And if you ever want a business write off, I'll tell you when there's like real estate meetups and stuff like that, so you can
Love
make
it.
it happen. Starting to kind of wrap this up is I think there's some good lessons here. You know, both for investors and for private money lenders, subject to buyers. I often wear a shirt. I'm not wearing it today, but it says "How you do real estate matters," and
Yeah.
it's always two-sided. It's how you treat people, which
Mm-hmm.
means, you're dealing with someone in foreclosure. Are you acknowledging that this is like one of the hardest times in their life, if not the hardest? Are you,
Mm-hmm.
someone just lost their parent, and how are you treating them, right? But it's also, are you protecting them with the paperwork? Are you protecting all parties involved? So it's how you do real estate with the people, but it's also the technical, it's the paperwork, it's the deal structuring, and so it's two-sided. And so, and this is a prime example of one, is there could have been, better ethics here. There could have been opportunities for better deal structuring, or even saying no on a deal, right? Like
Yeah.
knowing when to walk away.
There could have been better paperwork. I mean, all around, there's a lot of places it could have been better. Um, and there's a lot of pitfalls here, even for if you're wholesale. I really don't like assigning creative.
Me
Creative
neither.
is, it needs your rapport, because on these subject to, I think maintaining a rapport with your seller, if something comes up down the line, is going to be important. Just checking in every so often, make sure you have their correct phone number, say, hey, how are you? Stuff
Yeah.
comes up, and it's going to be a lot easier to navigate if you have a rapport with your seller. Because it comes
I
up on mine, and it's just easier to
Yeah.
say, hey, can you help me out with this real quick? Even if you have a power of attorney in every document under the sun, having the rapport is going to save you
It's huge.
a
Yeah.
lot quicker.
So I think that's critical. Yeah, I'm also against assigning creative deals. I just had someone who just last night and this morning was messaging me, "Hey, how can I do business with you?" And I was like, "Look, I'm 95% of my deals are bought creatively right now, so I'll be honest. I don't buy creative deals from wholesalers. They're generally not like, one, I don't believe in the practice of someone contracting something with a long-term view in mind and then
Yeah,
selling it to the highest bidder. I think, one, it inserts risk to the wholesaler into their business. I think it's a bad
it,
business model. It's a
it
short-sighted
does.
business model. And
Mm-hmm.
then the second part of that is it's deceptive to the seller.
100%.
And so different when it's a 30-day, cash in and out. I think that's
Yeah,
different.
it is different.
And so I'm trying to tell this guy, I'm like, look, go find someone with an uncomfortable situation and involve me in earlier in the process. And I'll still make sure you get paid. Not
Yeah,
everyone's faithful to their word. I care. I'll lose way more if I burn you in this one deal. My reputation's worth way more than the money I could potentially make burning you?
yeah.
And so, it's hard, right? But I think there's some lessons here, guys. Make sure you're doing subject to deals. Your paperwork's important. How you treat your sellers are important. I think that this person, just real quickly saying this, like, I'm not gonna lie, I hope some attorney generals start picking up some of these cases, but then part of me is like, oh, because
And
a lot of
I
times
I'm
they're sweeping with their
I'm
answers.
on the same fence as you. I really struggle with what's the best way to handle this, but I do think that within our networks we need to have accountability. And I don't think that means putting somebody on blast like the second something goes sideways. But if we know something really is just bad going on, I think we need to share that with our people and try and protect people
Yeah.
from that. And I just it's hard because it's hard to regulate ethics. In general, it's hard. There's a lot of gray area. Sometimes
And
it's
I'm
not
not trying to
gray.
be, I'm not trying to be, the popo. I'm not trying to, be part here.
Exactly. I know. And I kind of feel like that. Like I am the ethics popo. I should get a t-shirt because I'm always
Yeah,
talking about it.
yeah.
But it's
Me
just
too.
so important.
Well, but here's the thing. So, okay, so let's kind of mentally go through that. If we don't do it, Carly, like investor to investor, peer to peer, within the industry, what happens? So then you're going to get someone like the attorney generals who's going to, catch wind of this guy who is, apparently has a pattern that's been doing this, and they go after them for mortgage fraud, right? Like you take out a loan with an individual, but you take out a loan with no intent to repay it.
Yeah.
And so they go from that, or they go after them for, what happened with the seller, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
so they're going after him, and this person could face jail time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
There are some cases around the U.S., which, by the way, it's I want to do an episode where I actually get some of those case laws, study them, and give a recap.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Yeah, it'd be a fun way to be like,
Nay, nay.
I might label it the F around and find out series.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because there's always going to be bad faith actors. Like you can't weed them out. There's bad attorneys, there's bad agents, there's bad,
100%.
investors, there's bad, dairy farmers. I don't know, like all the other industries. I do not know why I got that one other industry thrown in there. But it's this idea that there's always going to be that.
Mhm.
And so part of me wants the attorney general to make an example of someone. So again, we can have these case studies. I can be like, look, here's like this dude got 10 years in jail, got 5 years, or got this felony on his record and these large fines and fees, or whatever. Because I want that to put the fear of God in people. I'm also trying to be like, I want to put the fear of God in some people, and so then some days I have to tell myself, the Holy Spirit's been telling me I've been speaking enough, shit this week. I need to quiet down and like sit down, because like there's a level that it's hard, right? Like I want, when people do bad, as someone who believes in doing good business, when I see people do bad business, there's a part of me that wants to be like, we write it on, let's go. Like,
Yeah, and I struggle with that too. And something that's very rampant here in our area is the rent to own type thing, but it's done with terrible paperwork. There's not a closing. They don't give people the right of foreclosure. They don't do any repairs. Like it gets under my skin so bad. But at the same time, like sometimes I need to but it's hard if I see it, like I want to call it out. But here's like, people are going to start banning me from their groups because,
yeah,
I'm just repeating the same things, but I want people to understand. And those really hurt the buyers, the tenant buyers,
the consumers, again,
yeah,
investors are making calculated risk here, right? But more than anything, you've got the sellers of these creative deals, and then you have the buyers of these creative deals who are civilians, who are consumers. And even more
yeah,
so if it's their primary residence, there's even more protections under the law for
yeah,
them. Carly, it's just a tough one, right? That this
I think
ethics
so.
battle is like, hey, we want people to do better. So, you know, how do we inject more ethics into the industry? Any final thoughts on that?
It's something I spend entirely too much time thinking about, and I have not come to a good answer yet. Um, because I am, like you, very libertarian. Like my answer is not generally get an authority involved, and
Yeah, build
but
a
I
board to
do.
constitute a, I don't know, they go do raids or something.
But when you see stuff happen, especially to sellers, it's painful, and I want to fix it. And sometimes sellers are just emotionally cut off, and they just can't deal with it anymore. I
Well,
mean, it
you had
happens
tried
on.
reaching out to that one, right?
Yeah, I did.
And
I did.
that seller, they just didn't, they're just like, they
I
didn't.
reached out to everybody in that transaction, and the buyer did talk to me a couple times. And so I was hopeful for a little while, but it didn't pan out. But for the most part, I think the agent responded to me once. I don't know if the wholesaler did, but there's risk for everybody in that line.
Uh, okay, so that's actually an important part. I'm curious, can you speak to what the agent said? Were they like, this isn't my problem, or were they very worried about their role? Like what did that look like?
Oh gosh, I don't recall. I don't recall it as being like super worried, but just kind of like
Well, let me know.
And I mean, there was a whole other funky layer to this, Courtney. I mean, and I could talk for hours, and I know we have to wrap this up, but there was a transaction coordinator, not the real estate agent kind, you know, the kind, that did all the paperwork and also signed on behalf of the buyer. So there's all these, yes, it was funky.
So I would never want that, and that actually might be intentional deceit because not deceit, but intentional because if they're not like that, that could make a federal case really difficult if they weren't the ones actually signing.
They had it, and like I said, I spent some time on this, but you know, as a pro bono type thing, and if you're not getting anywhere, it's only but so much digging that you do, unfortunately. But yeah, they this transaction coordinator signed as a nominee, which that's not even a term we use here in Virginia on stuff. So and I reached out to them, but they responded once or twice, but it kind of, I think there's teeth there if there was an authority that was willing to go, but as an individual attorney, like not in that realm, it wasn't a whole lot I could do except try and reverse it through another real estate transaction. But there was lots of layers of people making money, and not so above board looking things at the end of the day. Nothing maybe that if it had all gone fine, probably nobody's ever looking back at this and thinking anything. It's just, it's easier to pick things apart after the fact, but there were some red flags.
You know, I'm not going to open this door. I'm gonna like stand at this door, mention something, open up, whisper it, and then like slam it. I'm going to say, I have a belief that there is this growing trend of like thinking that transaction coordinators in the creative world having a level of authority in a transaction that people actually think is more valid than it actually is. Not only authority, but knowledge. Now, some of them, I've had conversations with them, they can be knowledgeable, but a lot of people are putting their faith in them as if they were an attorney, as if it was something that it was like a fail-proof stop where they could say, hey, if this person doesn't do right, I mean, like, I'm like, do they even carry, you know, errors and omissions insurance, you know, other than a course and a certification, that's not a licensure, you know, what are they, you know, and
it's crazy, and I would be lying to you if I said what they charge makes me seriously sick because
it's like a grand at least is what I'm saying.
Yeah, this one was 2,500 or 3,000. And did you just throw something?
I
I'm telling you, but I have never charged that in my life to do a creative closing, and I deeply care about my people. And this is just willy-nilly. Yes, frankly.
So cozy across the room.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't breakable.
No, and I think that's the reason why I allowed myself to. Again, I have this, it feels, you know, righteous indignation is the next word for it, but like, and it feels tough to say it because it's like, now I feel like I need to go interview a few TCs from a growing trend of TCs in the world of creative real estate, because I don't want to necessarily judge something that I don't personally use them. I will not pay for them. If someone needs them in a transaction, they're going to pay them because I sure as hell don't need them. Right. But like, there's a lot of this where I'm like, there's a permanent, really, again, I'm opening this door wider than I want to, but it's this, there's stuff like this. So coming back to ethics, there's stuff like this that's happening that I think is going to cause, there's a lot of areas for concern.
There is, and there can be good and there can be bad and there can be fair and there can be helpful and all these things. So yes, you can't have an overarching like determination.
Generalization.
Yeah. But there are issues.
Yeah, you know, there's a part of me that again wants to go and befriend some of them and say, I want to have a general conversation, because right now, I don't like drawing a circle around a group and saying it's us versus them. You know, I want to go understand, right? And because right now I feel like I'm just casting judgment on someone I don't know or a role I don't know, I've never used. But it's things that I'm seeing from deals like this and from others. And so, you know, ultimately, guys, when it comes to ethics, look, understand that maybe you're listening to this and you're a real estate agent and you're like, maybe you're going to recognize that you would have had some responsibility if you sold this, to the real estate agents in the greater New Orleans area. There was a period of time where I got 10 phone calls a week from different agents saying, what the heck is subject to? Because I'm getting all these offers, right? And I teach a lot of classes at brokerages on subject to. And sometimes, with transaction volume low, some agents are just like, yeah, whatever. This is the only offer we've ever had on this property. Fine, I'll just tell my seller to take it and advise them to take it. This is a sharp reminder that there is potential issues lurking for this agent in this transaction. Not guaranteed, right? And I don't know the full, but there could be, right? This is a subject to deal gone wrong. Now, I had an agent tell me that they were afraid to do subject to deals just because they're afraid something like this could happen. Well, how could, you could prevent it by doing some due diligence on the buyer, building in paperwork and understanding like, hey, if this deal has no equity, no cash flow, and this is an out-of-state investor with not a lot of experience, what might go wrong? Anything at that point.
Yeah. And you should be able to find somebody that can help guide you through that. Like, with hopefully if you're an agent that's seeing this come across your desk, I mean, a Google search should point you, hopefully, I don't know, like we need to have like a little, I don't know, database of people who can I call for some quick. I mean, I've helped agents go through these types of offers on, when they have something on the market traditional and they get a subject to and the red flags and the things. And it's important to have an understanding, at least overall, of the risk points for your seller.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, because here, how do you do due diligence on ethics, right? Like that's like how someone will respond. Like, are people going to do what they say they're going to do? A lot of real estate is, well, people are saying they're going to do X, Y, Z. So, Carly, this has been an interesting one. It's so hard because it's so conflicting, right?
It is.
We're seeing these deals. Let me be very clear. There are plenty of subject to deals that happen that go well. That the sellers,
the most.
Yeah, so many of them. But unfortunately, there is this what I fear to be a growing trend of ones going wrong. And a lot of it is, sure, bad faith actors, but then some of them they're well intended, but they don't know how to do the paperwork. They don't know how to run the numbers, or they don't know how to operate. There's a lot of little things like that. And so, and that's what we're trying to avoid is the people who are not just the overall, buttholes in the community. We're trying to go for the people who are well intended and wanting to do deals like this to help people, and as a way to get into the investing world, but to do it right. And so that who you learn from is critical. They need to be teaching you how to protect all parties involved. And if they're not teaching you about ethics, that should be a red flag as well.
I think so. I think so. And I just, I always reiterate, it's not a beginner strategy. It's just not. I mean, period. If you're brand new and never managed a property, I would not recommend doing a subject to deal unless the numbers are just so amazing. It would be almost impossible to mess up because there's just a lot of risk for everybody.
Yeah. Well, Carly, this has been a fun conversation. Also interesting. Also, the first time I've ever thrown something on camera. And also, I don't throw things off camera either, except for like my dog onto the couch. But anyway.
But hey, I'm with you. Like, I'm with you. I feel the same sentiment. I've had such a good time talking to you, and I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah. Well, look, tell people how they can get in touch with you, whether it's a website, social. What's the best way?
Okay. So my email is carly@creativerealestatelaw.com, and which I know the domain is way too long.
No, I can put it in the show notes.
That's 2025 problem. But yeah, carly@creativerealestatelaw.com. And then on socials, I'm Carly Nino, but without the tilde. So just Carly Nino.
Well, and I'll put both of those in the show notes, your socials and your email, so people can easily find it. Yeah. And then, you know what? I think ultimately, folks, especially if you're in the Virginia area, you're going to want to connect with Carly. And yeah, appreciate you having this conversation with me. I'm looking forward to connecting with you more.
Likewise. Thank you.